Well, warm welcome to this talk. Now, today we're going to be looking at something like the nature of truth and deception. It's going to be largely based on this paper here, a narrative review of the COVID-19 infodemic and censorship in healthcare. A little more on that in a minute. Let's just look at one of the first claims it's making in this paper, though. That's the full reference. The first claim made here is ideological and financial motivations have undermined science for decades. Can this be true?
Let me begin my questioning on the matter of whether or not nicotine is addictive. Let me ask you first, and I'd like to just go down the row, whether each of you believes that nicotine is not addictive. I heard virtually all of you touch on it, and just yes or no. Do you believe nicotine is not addictive?
I believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
Mr. Johnston.
Congressman, cigarettes and nicotine clearly do not meet the classic definitions of addiction. There is no intoxication.
We'll take that as a no, and again, time is short. If you could just, I think each of you believe nicotine is not addictive. We just would like to have this for the record.
I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
And I too believe that nicotine is not addictive.
Well, the 1994 big tobacco executives before Congress. Silly old me. I thought nicotine was one of the most addictive drugs in the world, responsible for hundreds of millions of deaths. Clearly, I've got it wrong. What do you think, Mr. Prime Minister?
To what he was more broadly insinuating, let me be unequivocal from this dispatch box that COVID vaccines are safe, Mr. Speaker.
Well, that was the then British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak speaking in the House of Commons in February last year, 2024. Haven't heard the current Prime Minister speak about it yet, but it just shows if you say it often enough, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, you might even start to believe it yourself, who knows. But we noticed there that Mr. Sunak didn't say effective. He must have forgotten. Right, let's move on to this paper now. Here we have the paper. This is the full reference. And that was just a few examples of ideological and financial motivations have undermined science for decades. Organisations and governments used misinformation, disinformation, censorship and secrecy to manage the COVID-19 pandemic. That sounds pretty serious. Misinformation, disinformation, censorship, secrecy. Maybe you can relate to some of those words, I don't know. But there is some interesting evidence in the paper. Now, this is the paper here. Very readable, in the public domain, freely available by a team of international United States-led scientists. There's the authors there, and there's where they work. So various places around the world, including one doctor there who's a former brigadier general in the US Army. Fascinating. So pretty reputable gang of writers there, I would have thought. Let's look at some more of what they're saying. Information can be distorted and shaped by corporations and governments for financial gain or ideological purposes. The doctrine of the party must be substantiated. Various rationales for employing censorship and secrecy during the COVID-19 pandemic are examined, including, much more to come in this paper, how organisations, governments created confusion about the risk. People can deliberately create confusion about risks associated with their products. Our products are safe and effective. And blame avoidance to shift responsibility to avoid accountability for their actions. Is there a lack of accountability for actions, or do you think people are being fully accountable at the moment? Let me know what you think. And the paper will go on to look at methods of censorship. Now, it gets data from scientific papers, government documents, mass media, articles, books, and personal accounts of physicians and scientists. So a pretty eclectic collection of data for this paper. Use of censorship and secrecy created a challenge for scientists, physicians, politicians, and the general public trying to understand COVID-related topics, and clearly our thinking has become clarified as more information has become available, which is good, but it's a pity it didn't happen earlier rather. Now, first paper that's mentioned here, Defending Merchants of Doubt. This is the paper here. Check out the reference. Now, here's some of the tactics, and this is where it gets really quite interesting. And when you read these, you go, oh yeah, that's what they were doing. See if you get one of those oh yeah moments. Tactics of doubt. Corporations engage in deliberate strategies. This is deliberate strategies to create doubt about scientific findings. And as we'll see, very often they don't even give you the scientific findings. So we looked at this example of the tobacco industry here. Despite overwhelming evidence of the dangers of smoking. There's overwhelming evidence of the dangers of pharmacological interventions. But if you don't talk about it, you don't know about it. Out of sight, out of mind. Best not worry about these things. Use of so-called experts. So that was the first tactic of doubt, bringing about doubt. Next, use of so-called experts. Corporations hire or fund scientists to challenge or undermine scientific findings to support the corporate narrative. Now, of course, people are available for hire. Certain ladies are available for hire. Even some gentlemen might be available for hire. Scientists are available for hire. Or, more likely perhaps, selection in what is funded. Look, why don't you trot off and fund this research here? I'm not giving you any money to fund this research here. You know, it's the selection in what is funded, and of course that determines what is published, and that determines what gets into the national guidelines. So that's another thing, use of so-called experts. You know, could it be that some people give a compromised opinion for the sake of making some money? Who knows? Maybe. Media manipulation. You really go, oh yeah. You know, look, we have a saying in medical matters, in medicine, that the retrospectoscope casts a clear white light. It's so obvious when you see it. Totally obvious when you see it. Anyway, let's carry on. By introducing fringe or discredited perspectives, corporations ensure that media coverage gives disproportionate weight to their desired narratives. And very often it's what is not said that shouts the loudest. What is not said shouts the loudest. Things that are simply ignored. You know, how many hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of Christians and Alawites have been murdered in Syria over the past week or two? The answer is we probably don't know the answer to that question, because mainstream media seems to completely ignore it. At least in the UK, I can't think I've seen anything on mainstream media about this. But we know that hundreds, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of Christians and Alawites have been killed by the new regime in Syria, not mentioned in the mainstream media. Maybe it doesn't fit in with their narrative. Very strange. But other conflicts around the world are reported in great lurid detail. Who knows? Maybe they do have an agenda. I couldn't possibly know that. Martin Luther King, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. You see, we expect our enemies to shout and scream and have a go at us. We expect the slings and arrows from our enemies. But in the end, that's not what bothers us. We expect that. Looking back in times in my life, and I'm sure in your life, when you've been in a bit of difficulty, okay, people are going to have a go at you. But did your friend stand up and say, no, just a minute, this is wrong? Because in the end, that's what you remember, the silence of your friends. And there's a great deal of selective silence around the world at the moment. And we gave that tragic example from Syria. So that's what we remember. In the end, the ones that were silent. And there was a deafening silence echoing around the world in many areas at the moment, if only you can hear it. By creating doubt and confusion, corporations manipulate public perception for their own financial gain. Now, don't take my word for this. This is all in this is all in the paper. It's all here, and it is completely readable. You can download the PDF free. Very generous. Free, high quality writing. Just read it. It's well worth reading. Quite long, but well worth reading. Now I want to move on now to the work of William R. Freudenberg. Now he wrote some fascinating papers. Risk and Recreancy, Privileged Access, Privileged Accounts, and Weapons of Mass Distraction. And again, this is the one of those, oh yes, of course, sort of feelings that you get when you watch this. Now, this is the first reference here, risk and recreancy. Now, recreancy is a really good word. What it really means is cowardice, but cowardice which is shameful. Shameful cowardice. Two really bad things there. Shameful and cowardice go together. Recreancy. So good word that summarises that. And he wrote these other papers. This is another great title, isn't it? Weapons of Mass Distraction. Right. Now, things that came up from his work. Blame avoidance. Shifting of responsibility, accountability for actions that result in adverse social consequences. So just shift it on to someone else. Pass it on. Pass the buck. Disproportionate attribution of blame. When corporations manipulate public narrative to redirect blame towards others, or indeed other things. It wasn't my product, it was the disease. Nothing to do with me, Governor. Well, I'm white as the driven snow. It was that other guy over there that did it. I didn't steal the donut, he did. She did. It wasn't my fault. Victim of circumstance. Nothing to do with me. Disproportionate attribution of blame when corporations manipulate public narrative to redirect blame towards others. Sounds a bit recreant, doesn't it? Which would be shameful cowardice. Normalisation of deviance. Over time, risky practices become normalised. So, okay, there's an element of risk, but yeah, it's the same as we did last year, and we'll probably do the same again next year. So live with it. You know, you've got to die something. The fact that I'm making a bit of money out of it, well, never mind. You can take the risk. I'll make the profit. Right, reduces the likelihood that problems will be recognised as serious threats. Privileged access to information. Oh yeah, moment. By controlling access to critical information, corporations and governments make it difficult for the public or regulatory bodies to fully understand the risks or consequences of their actions or products. Don't fully agree with this. If the regulatory authorities don't know, they should always give the safety of the public the benefit of the doubt. If they don't know, they shouldn't blag. They shouldn't make it up. They shouldn't assume the best. They should not presume. So I don't fully agree with this, but I think you get the sentiment that it's talking about. By controlling the flow of information, corporations diffuse or delay the blame. Let's publish this in 70 years' time, then it won't matter too much. We'll just kick it into the long grass, put it on the back burner, park the idea, whatever you want to call it, whichever expression you use for that. Misdirection. Divert public attention away from their actions. They focus attention on smaller, less critical issues or shift the narrative away from their culpability to natural causes. It wasn't because I was doing dodgy experiments, honestly. It was completely natural. Nothing to do with my experimentation. Absolutely natural. It's just the normal, rough and tumble of the world's ecosystems. Nothing to do with me jiggery pokering around with things I can't understand and can't control. Natural causes. Regulatory capture is another way corporations avoid accountability. So, pretty nice thinking there from, that's from William R. Freudenberg, published mostly, I think, back in the, from memory, back in the 90s, early 90s, most of his work came out. So, interesting academic work there where you go, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Thank you for watching.